Hey everybody, welcome to the next JetBrains TV webinar focused on .NET and Rider. I'm your developer advocate, Khalid Abu Hakma, focusing on technologies like Rider, ReSharper, .peak, .memory, .trace. And I'm glad to have you here today. It's going to be really fun. I was just talking to our guest backstage, and really nice, really nice fella. And I'm also excited about his demos today. But before we get started, let's do some housekeeping. If you're following us on YouTube or on Twitch, feel free to kind of, join us in chat. You'll find the chat somewhere on the right-hand side, whether you're on Twitch or on YouTube. Feel free to drop any questions that you have during the webinar, and we'll be sure to ask Niels as we go through the demo. Another thing, a very popular question. Feel free to ask it. Feel free not to ask it. But this session, this webinar is being recorded. So if you need to drop out anytime during this session, don't worry. You'll be able to come back, watch the video, and kind of learn and see some of the things that Niels is sharing with folks about Twilio and making phone calls with .NET. So short of that, let's welcome our guest, Niels, from Twilio. Hey, Niels, how's it going?
Hello, how's it going? I'm Niels. You may also know me as Swimberghe. That's my nickname online. And since 6 or 7 months ago, I joined Twilio as a software engineer for technical content. So maybe not. You have read some of our content.net. Yeah, I hope to interact with everyone going forward.
Yeah, I really love your blog. I also know your partner designed your blog to kind of have that cutesy burger avatar, which I really love too. So kudos to her and kind of helping you out with your blog and stuff. It's pretty awesome. So everyone should definitely check that out. But yeah, the focus of today is really building programmable phones into your .NET applications. So I'm really excited about it because from the perspective of phones, it just gives people a new way to interact with your applications. And that's why I was so excited to have you here today. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think depending on kind of the target group, the group that you're targeting, different communication mechanisms are preferred. But, phone numbers, SMS, and voice calls, those are kind of like the universal supported communication technology, which I think it's pretty important that you have the furthest reach. It's not the fanciest. It doesn't have the stickers and all the nice stuff, but it can be very powerful, and you can reach very far to all kinds of audiences.
Yeah. So on that note, I think it's probably a good time to kind of like give you the stage. If you want to share your screen, we can get that, get your desktop sharing in the session, and then I'll let you take it away. But again, if you have questions for Niels as he's beginning to share, please drop it in chat, and we'll try to answer those questions as we go through this webinar. So take it away, Niels.
All right, let me put this on the side so you don't see us. And then there we go.
Yep.
All right. I already gave a little bit of an introduction, but my name is Niels Swimberghe, also known as Swimberghe. And I'm now a software engineer of technical content at Twilio. And so you could work with me if you want, as I am also the .NET editor for the Developer Voices team. So for folks that like to write about technology, please check out twilio.com/voices, where you can see what it requires to contribute to the Twilio blog. And of course, we pay for that. Now, in addition to the Twilio blog, you can also find content on my personal blog, which Khalid mentioned earlier, which is swimberghe.net. And make sure to hover over the little hamburger when you're in an article, and you'll get a custom greeting. But you'll also find a lot of banter because I'm tweeting a lot, way too much at Real Swimberghe. So. But what we're going to talk about today is Twilio Voice, how to make phone calls with .NET, how to receive voice calls with .NET, and how you can actually call from a Blazor client application.
Mm-hmm.
So, but before I jump into Twilio Voice specifically, I do want to, set a baseline for everyone, for in case you don't know what Twilio does. And so, what Twilio does is we are a customer engagement platform, and we are best known in the developer community, at least for our communication technology. So, through our APIs, you can send text messages, voice calls, emails, video, chat, etc., etc. But on top of those communication technologies, we've also built some of our own applications to engage with our customers. And using our data platform, we can also personalize interactions with customers. But the focus of today will be how to do voice calls, which you can see over here, and phone numbers. But you can see that there's a lot more into this platform. And actually, there's even more than what's listed here, because I see that there's some things missing already. So what is a Twilio Voice? Twilio Voice is an API for developers to add voice calling capabilities to your applications. Now, you can make and receive voice calls. These voice calls can be phone calls, but they can also be voice over IP calls. So when you're using a phone number, that will be using phone calls. When you're not using a phone number, it will be over the internet, which would be voice over IP.
Mm-hmm.
And you can actually mix and match them. So you can have participants use voice over IP, and the other participants can use a phone number, or both can be voice over IP, or both can be phone numbers. It's all possible. Now, as a developer, you can manage how those voice calls are made using a single API. And you can add a bunch of functionality to the calls, like asking for input. You may know those that on your phone when you're having a phone call. There's those dial pads where you can touch different numbers. So you can use that as kind of asking for input. But you can also ask for input just through speech recognition. And then the speech will be transcribed by Twilio, and your application can then read that text, and you can, program your logic however you like. You can also play audio files, record audio, transcribe the audio, etc., etc. All right, now before we're going to jump into this first demo, I just do want to make a quick note. All these Twilio capabilities that you'll see in the demos, you will be able to do them yourself for free. You can sign up for a free Twilio account, and these trial accounts will give you $20 credit by default. And if you use this link, then you also get $10 extra when you upgrade. And then extra note, the phone numbers that I'm going to be using in this talk, they're going to be released after this talk. So please don't call them, because you might be calling some random company or person. I'm not sure.
That would be kind of funny if people did call it. Don't call it, people. Listen to Niels. He's telling you the truth.
All right. So for this first demo, I did gloss over this earlier, but Twilio actually has partnerships with telecom companies all over the world. And that's why you can buy phone numbers and make phone calls through what Twilio calls its super network.
Mm-hmm.
And so Twilio implements all these different protocols and APIs that are offered by these telecom companies, and then offers them over a single convenient API. So you only have to worry about this web API and not about all these telecom protocols. All right, let me stop sharing my screen here and share my entire screen. There we go. So I'm going to go into the terminal.
I can hear your dog in the back, which is it's cute, but yeah. If folks are wondering, there's a dog there, so it's okay.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So, okay, I do hear her peeping a little bit. I'll just let her out.
It's okay. If you're a dog owner, it's the, you know, it's the give and take of being a dog owner. Sometimes your dogs are chill, sometimes they whine and want to go outside. So, yep.
All right. So
Go
I
ahead.
already have the Twilio CLI installed. Now you can do everything that you see today using the Twilio CLI, which will the Twilio CLI is actually a Node.js application, but you can not only do this with Node.js, you can also do this with C#.NET. Well, with any .NET language, using the .NET SDK for Twilio. Or you can consume the API straight up. But you know, the Twilio CLI is a really convenient way to actually interact with the API. But you can do everything in any programming language that you want. So first, we're gonna do Twilio phone numbers, and I've already logged into my account. Numbers 5, and already you see that up there. Now, when you do this command, you essentially will be given a list of phone numbers, and you can pick which one you want. And I want to use phone number from the United States. That's why I'm going to use US. And I live in the Washington, D.C. area, so the DMV area. So I also want to use a specific area code, because every state has their own area codes, and sometimes even multiple, I think. So the result of this is that you'll have a list of phone numbers that you can pick from, and whatever one looks best to you, you just pick. Yes. Now we have a phone number. Now we can start using this phone number to make voice calls, send text messages, and even do like WhatsApp messages. So now that I have a phone number, let's see how we can actually make a phone call. So here I have a console application, and I've already configured a couple of things. So I added configuration to my application, but I'm only loading it from user secrets. And the reason I'm using user secrets is because this configuration, and specifically the API key secret, is a very sensitive secret. You don't want to share that, or you're going to be giving access to your Twilio account if you accidentally, check it into GitHub or something like that. So I'm pulling this all from configuration, but you can think of this as the username and password. So I'm going to grab these, the account SID, which identifies my Twilio account, the API key ID, API key secret, which is essentially username and password. And I'm going to pass these into the Twilio client.init method. And this is coming from a NuGet package. Let me quickly show this. The NuGet package called Twilio, which is the NuGet package that will install the Twilio SDK for .NET.
So that SDK just wraps the existing web APIs, right? Like there's no magic in the SDK other than it's like idiomatic C#.NET, right?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay.
There are a little bit of extra things in there, which we'll see later, which is not API specific. We'll get to that soon.
Okay.
So when I'm going to run this application, the console is going to ask me for the phone number I want to initiate the call from, and to which phone number I want to initiate the call. And then using the SDK, the Twilio SDK, we're going to create a call resource. And so we'll pass the from and to phone numbers in here. And then you do have to specify this mandatory parameter, which is the URL. And this URL contains instructions on what to do in this voice call. So I already created an HTTP file here to conveniently see what this actually does. So by default, if I don't specify, you can specify which method you want. So you want to do like HTTP get or HTTP post. But in this case, by default, it will be a post, which is why I'm doing a post here. So when I run this, you'll see that the result is are these XML instructions. And so using Alice's voice, some Twilio will say, thanks for trying our documentation, enjoy, and then play this MP3 file.
That's really cool.
So let's run this. And I'm going to make a phone call to this phone number. And I'm going to be using this phone number throughout the demos. This is not my real phone number. It's actually a Twilio phone number, which proxies to my real phone number, just so that I don't dox myself. Okay, now I got to go back to, oops, I didn't click the right configuration. So call phone number and now click run. There we go. So from the phone number that we just bought, oh, that's not in here, that's in the terminal. So this phone number, copy, run. And then from the other phone number, and now I should be receiving a phone call. Oh, it's actually being screened. All right. I'm not sure if you can hear this.
Yep, we can hear it.
So I'm not going to play this too long because I don't want to get JetBrains copyright striked. Because it was like being screened by my Google Assistant thing, which checks for spam.
Mm-hmm.
The first part of this was cut off, but then it started playing this audio file, which apparently it's their Rickroll music. So thank you, Twilio Docs team, for Rickrolling me and the audience of JetBrains. Now, I don't think we want to play the Rickroll music, so instead, we're going to show you how we can actually create our own instructions. Let's see if I have those slides somewhere.
It was kind of interesting to see like the HTTP methods of get and post. It's like it hints that Twilio can actually send you information right over a web request, which is kind of neat. So yeah.
Yeah, and so all these demos that you'll see are available at this GitHub repository. So what did we just see? What are those instructions? Now, that XML is called TwiML, which is XML, but it's a specific set of elements and attributes that you can use to tell Twilio, hey, this is how you should respond to a text message, or this is how you should manage the phone call. And so some of the verbs or elements that are available in the TwiML is dial, which will dial a phone number or a client. Client is what you dial if you want to do a voice over IP. Then the gather verb will ask, hey, will ask for input, which I described a little bit earlier, either via speech recognition or the dial pad. Now pause, you can pause for any number of seconds that you specify. Pay, which is pretty interesting. You can actually facilitate payments over a voice call. And so that should also help if you want to do like payment over voice calls, but it has to be compliant, which I think, anytime you do payments, it has to be compliant. So that will be able to help you there. Then play can play audio files, record will record what the voice call participants are saying. And you can also specify some attributes to transcribe it to text. And then say is what we saw earlier. You can specify a voice in one of the attributes to use a specific voice like Alice, and then it will not do transcription, but a speech to text translation.
What's your favorite? Speech. Yeah, what's your favorite voice Twilio offers?
My favorite verb.
The voice out of the say. Yeah. Alice.
So I haven't played around with any other than Alice. But you can see that in the documentation. So let me find that. What do we see here? Twilio.com/docs/voice/TwiML. And then the attribute was voice. So I'm going to search for this. Oh, actually, I should look for say. Go and voice. So I think some of these voices you may have heard before because you can use any of the Amazon Poly voices.
Oh, wow.
And I think the Amazon Poly voices are used like across, the industry for a lot of applications.
Wow, that's great. All right, I'll let you get back to your demo. I apologize for derailing it.
Oh, no worries, no worries.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad you actually asked this so I could just pull out the docs, but you can see there's like a bunch of different verbs that you can use
Mhm.
to manage and do whatever you need to do in your voice calls.
Yeah, that pay one looks really, really interesting. So I'm gonna definitely check that out after this webinar. So
Yeah, and that one got recently upgraded. I think it used to be specifically with Stripe or a
Mhm.
specific protocol, and now it's like upgraded to any generic pay connector, so you could use any payment
Oh
integration that you
wow.
want.
Oh wow, that's amazing. All right, I'll let you get back to demo.
Now that URL that we saw is public, and um, whenever Twilio needs to have instructions to either respond to text messages or to manage phone calls, Twilio will make an HTTP request to where you configured it to make the HTTP request. So that does mean that where that TwiML lives, where your TwiML is responded to using HTTP, has to be publicly available over the internet.
Mhm.
And now this concept of when a text message comes in, or when a voice call comes in, or when you're making a voice call, and when that event happens and Twilio sends that HTTP request to you with the details, like you can see here, the details from to body. It's a little blurry,
Mhm.
sorry. So those details will be form encoded and passed to the URL that you specify. So you can then use a ASP.NET Core application, for example, to read those values and then use those values to generate your Twilio response. And then your Twilio response will be interpreted by Twilio, and that's how you manage phone calls and interactions on the Twilio platform. Now, this concept of something happens, an event happens, and let some URL know, that's called webhooks. But that does mean it has to be public. So that brings us to the next part of the demo, which is we're going to create our first webhook using ASP.NET Core. And so instead of using this nefarious TwiML, we're going to use a better TwiML ourselves. So here I got a minimal API that will handle an HTTP request at the root path, so /. And using the Twilio SDK, I'm going to create a voice response. Now, this is how you can generate TwiML using .NET objects. So what I was saying earlier is that the SDK doesn't only provide a wrapper around the Twilio API. It also
Mhm.
provides these objects which will help you programmatically generate TwiML. So for the voice response, we're first going to pause for 2 seconds, and then we're going to ask, hey, what is your favorite IDE? Press 1 for JetBrains Writer, 2 for Vim, and 3 for Notepad. And don't complain to me that these are not really IDEs. It's just details. It's just a demo. And then I'm going to use the gather verb to ask the caller or the voice call participant for input. And so the inputs that I'm going to ask for are DTMF codes. DTMF is the dial pad. So I
Mhm.
think D stands for dial, T stands for tone, and then I forgot what M is, and then F is frequency, I think. Because every different dial that you click has a different frequency.
Mm.
And so when that is transmitted over over the call, that's like that frequency is analyzed, and that's how they know which dial you actually clicked. Now you could also use speech recognition, which I mentioned earlier, but I just want to keep it simple and use the dial pad here. And
Yeah, I
I
imagine
go ahead.
speech recognition's difficult given people have different accents and stuff. So
Hmm.
you probably want to like use that sparingly, especially in sensitive situations. Makes a lot of sense. Yep.
Yeah, and it's also hard to do it programmatically. So, or to respond to that programmatically, you would
Hmm.
essentially start to need. Oh, I can't talk. You would need like artificial intelligence to extract the intent from
Hmm.
somebody's speech
Hmm.
and then break that down to programmatically respond to that. So that that gets a lot more complicated, unless you're like asking very specific questions like, "What's your phone number?" Those kind of like things that you can predict exactly the syntax that they will respond with.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But I love the fluent style of it. It looks very approachable too. It's not a big scary API. So it's very, very cool.
Yeah, and in this case, because I'm only asking for one number, one, two, or three, I'm going to limit the amount of digits that are sent to just one.
Hmm.
And then when the call participant clicks on that dial pad, the result of that will be transmitted back to Twilio. Twilio will receive that event and then send another HTTP request to your webhook. So in this case, I'm telling it, okay, the result of this gather action, send that to the slash submit. And so this is a relative URL. You can make an absolute URL as well. But if you're using a relative URL, it's going to automatically use the same host and port that you were using before. And so it will match with this API endpoint. And in this one, we're actually going to accept the HTTP request because I want to read that digit that the person has clicked. So I'm going to grab the form from the HTTP request because whenever Twilio is doing a post request to you, it's going to be form encoded. And then I'm going to grab the digit from the digits property. Now, because I limited it to one digit, I know that I can do like a dot single, and then I will just have the one number as a string. Now, then I'm logging this so we can actually see the result. But I'm again creating some TwiML here to just let the person know that what digit they clicked, and then say goodbye. Now, when you're generating that TwiML, you can return this using this extension method. So it's results.extensions.twiml, and this will take care of creating a TwiML result, which will take care of serializing it to XML, setting the correct content type header.
Hmm.
Now, this voice response to generate TwiML, that comes from the Twilio SDK, and so this as well. But this extension method and other types of integrations with ASP.NET specifically comes from a separate package, which is called, scroll up here, twilio.aspnet.core. Now, there's also a twilio.aspnet.mvc package, which
Hmm.
is for .NET Framework. We're on .NET Core, so we're going to use the .core here. And this is a helper library just to make integrating with ASP.NET websites easier.
Yeah,
All right.
I imagine also works like the MVC package probably returns like an I action result. So probably
Mhm.
work with like Razor pages too if people are using that, right?
Yeah. So Razor Pages is based on MVC. So
Hmm.
we built this for MVC controllers, but as far as I know, any kind of action result that you return in MVC controllers, you can also return in Razor Pages. So you could use it there,
Hmm.
um, if you want to.
Yep.
Let's see, webhook service. So I'm going to start this minimal API application. And before we actually pass this into, okay, here, before we actually pass this to Twilio, which we'll do later, we'll run this console program later again. Let's take a look at what the result is. So I'm going to make a post request to the root of the application. It's this one. Oh, the format of the URI could not be determined. Maybe I fat fingered something. Let me stop this and take a look. URL, no, submit. This looks fine. I should read that error again. The format of the URI could not be, okay. I don't think I had this error before, but I did run into this in the past, long past. So I think I should just specify explicitly that this is a relative URL. I didn't do this before. Well, let's see if it works now. Run this again.
So many APIs are changing in .NET. Sometimes like things just slowly move. Like,
yeah. So I prepared all these demos and presentations on my work machine, which is a MacBook. And so there could definitely be some version differences between what I'm running there, what I'm running here. And I did update like a bunch of stuff right before this talk, which is dangerous.
Living on the edge. It's fine.
All right, it works. So now we can see as the result, we can see this TwiML, pause, say, and it's asking for, what is your favorite ID? Now, when somebody touches that dial pad, Twilio will send a lot more data than just the digits, but I only need the digits in this case to test this. So this is how you would, send an HTTP request using JetBrains. Specify the content type as form, and then specify the parameters that you want. So when we run this, you can see you pressed 1, good choice, goodbye. So, but as I said earlier, because this is using the principle of webhooks, this means this ASP.NET Core service has to be publicly available, which it's not at the moment. It's running locally. So one way to solve this is to use tunneling software. And one of the very popular tunnels is ngrok. So I'm going to use ngrok, and ngrok is going to tunnel my local machine publicly to a public URL. So the way you can do this is using the ngrok CLI, say ngrok HTTP, and then I'm going to use that URL. And now you can see over here, there's this forwarding URL, which is the public URL that ngrok is making available to me. So if I replace this, it should still work. There we go. I'm still getting the same response. And now that's publicly available. So now that it's publicly available, I can go back to this nefarious TwiML and replace it with our legit TwiML.
I think what's neat while I'm watching you kind of do the demo is like, these are just, stateless endpoints. So they're really easy to unit test. Like just looking at it, like you send in a request, you get a response, and you can kind of check the validity of that. It's pretty neat.
Yeah. That's one thing that I personally really like about webhooks is like essentially they're just sending HTTP requests, and that's what you're used to working with if you're a web developer. So it's like speaking your language, which at Twilio developers has always been like part of the DNA, because the founder is a developer still to this day. And so that's also always going to be important that, the APIs are just very intuitive and approachable for developers.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's also why, like, I personally think what's really cool is that you get that trial account. If you have an ID that you want to pitch to your client, like before I worked at Twilio, I worked for a web agency, I worked for government contractors, and for a startup. I would create these proof of concepts all the time, and these type of trial accounts let you quickly create a proof of concept, show it to your client. Hey, do you like this? And if they say yes, then you can make a full-blown project out of it, and you can deliver a lot of value really quickly.
Yeah, it definitely looks that way for sure.
All right, I went on a tangent.
No, it's a good tangent. You keep going though.
Let's run the phone number application again. I replaced the URL. Yeah. And so the phone number was the Twilio phone number, which is in the terminal. Oh, that probably didn't copy it. Let me make sure I copy it from this Twilio phone number, and then using my proxy phone number. Oh, sorry. Should receive a call again. Missed call. That was very fast. Let me just do that again. Terminal. Oh, I'm getting another call here. And it's transcribing it. This is the Google.
Yeah, I have a
thing.
Pixel too, and it's typically helpful, but probably not in this case.
No,
So
not in this case. But I did like use the voicemail, so let's see if I can hear this. No, okay. Let me just try this again. So from this, no, it's the 202 phone number. So let me stop this one and just directly pass it into here. Simple for me.
yeah, while you're working on that, one of our individuals in chat said in their organization, we found a need to make calls to the person on call for application support. So the idea was to have Twilio and Slack integration kind of work together to kind of reach individuals in times of like emergency and stuff, which is really neat. So thanks for sharing that, folks.
Yeah, you can definitely build that with Twilio. Now, it was like saying, hey, apply changes, which is usually what it says when you're debugging and you're like doing
Hot reload,
live
yeah.
reload, hot reload,
Mhm.
but it's not running. So maybe there's just a little strange
If
thing going on here. I'm not sure.
Well, if you go, yeah, it actually is running. So like there is a webhook service running. You have multiple run configurations, so
Yeah.
you can stop that if you want, then restart it from there.
Yeah,
So
but
yeah.
it's not, I'm not changing the code for the webhook service though.
Oh,
So,
okay. All right.
well, let's see. All right, I don't think it's liking this DC number that I'm using. Google doesn't seem to like it. So let me use a different phone number that I already have. Let me go back in the terminal. Twilio phone numbers list. And I want to see properties, the phone number, and the voice URL. All right, so I'm gonna grab this phone number. See if that's better. Oop, I also stopped my webhook service by accident. That's all right. Now run call phone number. Okay, Google is on fire today.
Yes, let's blame the AIs. They can't defend themselves. So I think it's always the right call, I think. Until they become self-aware, and then they get angry at us and come after us. So, but
let me quickly check. Oh, so one thing that it could be is something with Ngrok, because I accidentally upgraded this. Let's quickly see.
man, you really tempted the demo gods today. You're changing code, updating dependencies.
Well, this machine I'm not using frequently, so it already had old stuff that had to be fixed.
Yeah.
Okay. So it says URL form encoded. Then is there a response? The response says application XML, so this should be totally fine. All right. We'll just skip past this.
Okay.
But what we can do is instead of using this, and now this may fail as well, but we'll see. So this is for making outgoing phone calls. You can also receive phone calls. So when somebody's calling that phone number that we were using, refer back to that. So if somebody calls this phone number, I'm also going to use this webhook. Right, but to do that, we also have to update that phone number. So I'm going to say Twilio phone numbers update. Going to grab that phone number, and I'm going to specify the voice URL, which is how you can tell Twilio where to send that webhook request to. You can also do this in the Twilio console, which is the web interface, if you're not familiar with the console.
Yeah, I mean, I know I used Twilio like maybe even 5-10 years ago. It's like, oh, I wish the CLI existed back then, because going back and forth from code to the web UI, it's helpful, but it can kind of be tedious at times. So this is awesome. Like, I love it.
20298. I'm having a hard time reading this. 20298980143 End current call. I'm calling someone. Okay, my phone is really acting up. Should probably have restarted my phone. Okay, hang up. And let's call again.
What is your favorite IDE? Press 1 for JetBrains Writer. Press 2 for Vim. Press 3 for Notepad.
So I'm going to press 1.
You pressed 1. Good choice. Goodbye.
All right, so that's what should have happened before for outbound calls. But now everyone that's watching and that has a United States phone number, well, you can also use other phone numbers, but you might have international charges. So if you don't have a US phone number, maybe don't do this. But call this phone number that you see here, and then you can also pick your favorite IDE between these 3 options. Now let's go
I only see one option there. I don't know if it's the. No, I was joking.
Only one real option. Yeah. I don't think it's fair either, but that's all right. So I'm just going to wait a little bit to see if anyone is going to bite. We'll see. Now, consolation price for those that don't have a US phone number, you can, let me keep this on screen, this phone number. You can, easier to read it. You can, get started today with a trial account and just try this yourself, and then buy a phone number for your country. So,
yeah, it's super cool. I mean, just the idea of giving your users more options and capabilities to kind of interact with an application. I kind of tweeted before this webinar that even in the United States, like basically every person in the country has a smartphone and something that can make phone calls. So that's probably even bigger than most people that have desktops or laptops. So you're really broadening your potential user
hmm
base by
hmm
doing something like this, which is pretty neat.
And somebody actually voted, so we got one
Oh.
person, which I'm really excited about.
Thank you, folks.
uh, I was waiting for somebody to just troll and press 3, but doesn't look like we
Nobody's
have
allowed to press
trolls.
3. Nobody.
I should have
You're
added some logic to just say you're wrong. Oh, there's some trolls.
Oh,
There are some trolls.
man. Shadow banned. Be gone. No, I'm just joking. No, that's
All right,
super cool, though.
I'm going to stop this. So anybody that's calling now is probably gonna hear something else, which is like an application error occurred. Because my webhook won't be responding anymore. All right. Let's go back to these slides. All right, I did this. Questions so far?
Yeah, I mean, the folks, I haven't seen anyone ask too deep a question other than like, can we get access to the source code and stuff like that?
Mhm.
Anybody who's interested in the source code, we'll put the links to the GitHub repos that Niels mentioned earlier. We'll put them in the show notes. So you'll be able to get access to that. But other than that, I'm not necessarily seeing any questions. So if you want to continue,
Great.
please be my guest.
All right, so for this next demo, let me close that. Oh, I already closed that instance of Writer. Great. For my next demo, this demo has a lot of moving parts, but let's take a look at the application itself first. So I am going to run all these 4 projects. Now, you don't have to build this using 4 projects. I personally see value in doing it this way, but you can definitely do this all in one project. But for security reasons, I'm kind of splitting this up in like single responsibility, that kind of stuff. I'm architecting it for that reason. So I got this run projects configuration, which will run all these 4 projects. So let's run it. And so here we have a Blazor WebAssembly application that will list a bunch of people and pets. And these pets and the faces and pets that are showing here were submitted by the .NET community on Twitter. So thank you to everyone that submitted their pet or picture. And so let's see what we can do with this application. So at the bottom right, it's a little subtle, but there's a little thing here that says show phone. And when you click on it, this dialer pops up. And so I personally designed this with CSS to make sure that it kind of looks like a phone or the dialer, what you would expect. Now, you don't necessarily need this. Like you can just type in here however you like. But I personally like how it kind of emulates a real world object, makes it look real. And you can enter any phone number here and start calling that phone number from the browser. So in this case, that we use Twilio Voice Client, which is using voice over IP to Twilio. And then depending on who you're trying to call, it can do reach a client over voice over IP again on the other end, or it can be a phone number on the other end. This can be really flexible.
So just to clarify, you're saying like when a user logs into a web page, they can actually get a virtual phone number that you can call. So you can actually call someone's browser, which that's wild, right?
Yeah, and so if you're doing voice over IP to voice over IP, you don't even need a phone number. But to make the translation between voice over IP to like the phone network, you do need a phone number because the call has to come from someone's phone number.
Oh, wow. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
And I didn't ask for the community's phone numbers because I don't want to accidentally leak their phone numbers. But I did configure some phone numbers for these pets. So let's see if cookie is available. So when I click on this call button, populating it over here, and then I can click the call button.
Oh, you may have not shared your audio. I don't hear it ringing.
Yeah. All right, so let me stop sharing screen and reshare screen. Share system audio. All right. Now,
Yep, looks good now. So
it looks like my webhook service stopped. Let me just take a quick look. Looks like upgrading ngrok has caused me an issue. All right. So let me just try to run this one more time. Is my ngrok? Oh, my ngrok tunnel is still running here. Maybe that will fix the issue. Let's run this again. Yes. Okay, it's not complaining. Cool.
Yeah, ngrok sometimes limits the number of like public URLs you can bind to. So for folks trying to use ngrok, just keep that in mind.
Yeah, and since we're talking about this, I can skip to this. So instead of manually starting ngrok via the command or via a shell, I'm actually using, where is it? I'm using CLI wrap, which is a really neat library to execute processes. So you could use like the process API that's provided by .NET to also invoke this. But this way, when I'm starting my webhook service, which is a minimal API, I can automatically start like an ngrok tunnel. This really smoothens out the development process. Now, I'm only doing this in development though, because in production, you would make sure that your minimal API is already behind a reverse proxy, or you're exposing it directly publicly. Anyway, let me get back to this demo, and let me call cookie again.
I really hope Cookie picks up because it looks like a good dog.
It sounds like Cookie is sleeping, actually.
Yeah, don't bother Cookie. Let her sleep.
Okay. we're gonna call someone else then. Let's see if Jack's available, which is my dog. Okay. He's angry that I locked the door. He wants to come in, I think. I also got Jasmine over here.
That must be catnip she's consuming.
And then I also took the liberty to include Khalid's dog, Samson.
Yeah, Samson. Oh, he's not happy that we're calling him. Samson, calm down, buddy. Calm down. We're just calling.
So I can show how I did this later if we have some time. We'll see. And now I did add my own proxy Twilio phone number, which I was using before, so I can also call myself again.
By the way, you look better with a beard, so I think everybody wants you to grow that beard.
Hello? Maybe hearing, double stuff.
That's really cool. So just to be clear, you call that number which proxied to your real phone number, right? So you can you can bounce calls between several numbers to get to the right person.
You're adding more round trips, so there's like a little bit more delays. But yeah, you can do that. So great for privacy and for demonstration purposes.
Yeah, very cool.
Now, regarding this beard, I just shaved it off a couple days ago. I'm sorry.
People watching this,
not at all
yeah,
Photoshop.
please leave comments telling Niels to grow that beard. He needs to. Peer pressure.
So how does this application actually work? I'm going to grab this slide. Over here is the slide. So it's architected in multiple services. So to be able to actually communicate with the Twilio API, you first need a access token. And so this access token will specify a couple of things, but you need it to actually connect to Twilio, and only then you can start doing voice over IP calls. So this Twilio access service is one of the minimal API services that I have there. And you want to make sure that this, uses authentication and authorization so that you only generate the tokens for people that you want to use, have access or be able to make voice calls. Now, in my case, I don't have any authorization and authentication, but I have put it in a separate service so that I can actually use at least network security. So, if I would have merged all of these applications in one, then any of the participants, any of the watchers, the viewers here, could also call it and start stealing my tokens. So that's why I put this in a separate service.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. This service is going to be called by this Blazor WebAssembly client. And this Blazor WebAssembly client is using JavaScript interop to communicate with the voice JavaScript SDK. Now, the voice JavaScript SDK is the SDK that makes all this communication over for facilitating voice over IP possible to Twilio. So this SDK will open a not a WebRTC connection, a WebSocket connection, which is like a bidirectional connection over which events are transmitted. So when somebody's calling that Twilio phone number, it's gonna notify the connected client over that WebSocket connection. It's also gonna transmit the audio over that connection. Now, when a phone comes in, say from this phone number, again, we need a webhook service. So we configured a webhook service that's going to go to this minimal API, and it's exposed to the public internet using this ingrok tunnel. And the same happens for when we're doing an outgoing call instead of an incoming call. So when the client, the voice JavaScript SDK, is telling, hey, call this number, it's also going to go to this webhook service first. So let's take a look at the code for that. So the token service is fairly straightforward. I'm grabbing the username and password again, API key and account SID. And for those that don't know what SID means, it's short for a string identifier. So it's just an identifier. Now I also have an application ID. Now in the past, we stored the webhook URL on the phone number, and that's for incoming calls. Now when you're using voice over IP through the JavaScript SDK, we all Twilio also needs to know where is the webhook going to go. So you configure that on the application resource that's in the API. Let me see. So it should be API for applications list. There we go. And so I want to property piece for the voice URL. You can see that's where that ngrok URL is configured. Now I'm doing this in that tunnel service. So after I created that tunnel, I'm actually grabbing that public forwarding URL from ngrok, and I'm using the Twilio SDK to configure the voice URL on the phone number, but also the voice URL on the application. So that's how those are automatically wired up when I'm starting this webhook service. All right, so second service, the webhook service. When a call comes in, I'm going to generate some TwiML that tells Twilio to dial the client. Wait, I actually skipped over some details. I'm sorry for jumping around so much. So let's go back to the token service. So I got distracted by this application. So when you generate a token, you also have to specify the identity. And this will be the identity that identifies the voice over IP client. Now, if there's multiple users that share the same identity and then receive are like called, both of those connected clients are gonna start ringing. And the first person to click accept will get the voice call, the other will stop ringing. Now, depending, so that may be desirable, that may not be desirable. It depends on your needs. So you generate this identity according to your application's needs.
That makes a lot of sense. Like, like using Slack, for example, when someone calls you in Slack, maybe it rings on your machine, but it also rings on your phone. Like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I was also thinking about, okay, maybe this is kind of like a group of people that, like, if you're in a, how would you say,
Call center,
a call center scenario, then it might ring multiple people, and the first person to click. That's probably not how it works. I probably don't know how call centers work, but there might be a scenario where that makes sense.
Yep.
So you have to create this hash set of grants, so you could actually provide multiple grants. Now we only need the voice grant. Now on this voice grant, you have to specify this application ID, which is what you saw earlier. And so when Twilio receives this token, it will decrypt the token and it will look at this ID, and then that is how it figures out, oh, that's where I need to send a webhook request. You also explicitly have to specify that you want to allow incoming phone calls, because by default, it will only support outgoing phone calls. If you want phone calls to also come in, you also have to specify this as true. And then you create this token object and return it by saying to JWT, which will create a string. So let's quickly test this out. And now you can see, this, it's not random, but it's an encrypted JWT token or JA token, however you want to pronounce it. Now, once the client has that token, it will connect to Twilio, and Twilio will then start reaching out to these webhooks. So when the voice over IP client instructs Twilio to call someone, it's going to go to this webhook. So I specified a parameter in the client which specifies what phone number to call. And so using that phone number that I'm grabbing from the form, I am creating this dial TwiML. The result of this would be this. So you can see the response is call this phone number. And the caller ID is the Twilio phone number. So you have to specify from who you're actually making this phone call. So this is the translation from voice over IP using this phone number to originate the phone call.
That makes a lot of sense for, like, maybe you have individuals within a company, but you want to represent the company on the phone call. So you use like the company's 800 number, right, as the caller ID.
And you can also like use special phone numbers. I haven't played with that myself, but like phone numbers that are shorter, which might make it more recognizable. Yeah. All right. Now, when the reverse happens, when a phone call comes in because somebody calls the Twilio phone number, then this webhook is going to be triggered. So this is going to create another TwiML response. And in this case, instead of you like passing the phone number to the dial method, we're going to create a new dial, and we're going to use the client method on this dial. And client will specify which voice over IP client that you want to dial, which has to match, like that identity has to match with the identity that I specified in the JA token that from earlier. Right, let's quickly see what that looks like. And so it would look like this. Now the voice client is actually going to glue that all together. So we can look at this dialer component. This Blazor WebAssembly component is rendering a bunch of UI, and depending on the state, like is the call coming in, is it ongoing, it's going to like switch between different classes to make that UI work. no, this is not a lesson on Blazor WebAssembly, so we're gonna skip over that. And instead, we're gonna look at this on initialized async. So the first thing I'm doing here is creating a .NET object reference, and I'm gonna pass that object reference to JavaScript so that the JavaScript can also call back into my .NET object, which in this case is this, so it's referring to this dialer component. Then I'm going to use some JavaScript interop to import this dialer module. This dialer module will return a function that's called createDialer, which I want to invoke. Let's take a look at this dialer.js. So this is the function that it's going to be called, and the function is going to return an object which holds some properties. So the device will hold the virtual Twilio phone device. Call will hold onto the active call. And then the .NET object reference is what you saw earlier. That will be used to call back into the dialer to notify the component, hey, something happened. Now let me go back into here. Then next, we're going to get that JA token. So I'm actually using .NET for this, but you could also do this in JavaScript if that's the preferred way for you. But I'm using the HTTP client. I'm going to go to /API token, and it's going to return that token, which I'm then returning here, and then passing it into the setup Twilio device function in JavaScript. So back in JavaScript, setup Twilio device accepts this JA token and creates an instance of this Twilio.device class. Now you can specify some extra parameters which you can find in the documentation. I'm only specifying one, which is this close protection. And what this will do is if an ongoing call is, if there's like a call actively ongoing, if you close your tab, it will warn you, hey, do you really want to exit? Just like this pop-up dialog. Now, if you don't, then it will just exit if you don't specify this. Now, once I create this, I'm storing this on that object, and I'm registering some events. So this registered event will be triggered when the JA token, when the voice SDK successfully connects with Twilio. And I'm going to notify the Blazor component of that event happening by using this .NET object reference invoke method. Back into Blazor. You can see over here, is Twilio device registers is set to true. I'm saying state has changed, and now that component will re-render, making sure that it will reflect that event change. Now, when an error happens, it will also show that when a call comes in, it's going to store the call on this object, but it's also going to set up some more events on this call object itself. But I'm also going to let the Blazor component know, hey, a call is coming in, which you'll see later. I'm going to show that. And then lastly, I'm going to register this device. So the moment I'm calling this register device, this is actually going to be triggered. Now, on the call, I'm wiring up even more events. So when the call is accepted, when it's canceled, when it's disconnected, rejected, or when there's an error on the call, all of these are going to call back into the Blazor component, which will, again, update the state on the Blazor component, and it will re-render. But there's also a function called start call, which is how you're going to make a phone call. So from Blazor, let's find this. In Blazor, there's this method, start call. And so using JavaScript interop, I'm going to call this from Blazor when we're clicking that button call. And it's going to call the function, and it's going to pass in the dial number, which is bound to that input field at the top of the dialer. And so this phone number will be passed into this connect through this params object. And so these params are going to be passed into your webhook, which is what we saw here. So this is what, there's going to be more data than just this, but this is the specific parameter that you're passing in. And then that the webhook is reading out and then using to generate the dial TwiML. Now there's also end call, accept call, reject call, destroy. So you can check out this source code later if you want to really go into the details. But I think you, at a high level, understand what's happening.
I think what's cool looking at the JavaScript API or the library that you're showing us is like, while you use like a traditional number pad for like phone, you can really do anything you want to kind of interact and create like an experience in the browser, right? So you could connect people through an interesting UI and like dial numbers based on anything really. So it's pretty powerful. It's really cool to see it.
Yeah, I was thinking of creating this application for fun to like do the phone number game. Probably somebody probably already has done. If you are familiar with the phone number game, it's like when you call somebody, they have to say a sentence, and then that person will call somebody else, and they will say the sentence again. But over time, like the original message will be completely changed because of our flawed minds. But the goal is like to keep the message as intact as possible. I think it would be pretty cool, like to use this Twilio voice SDK, or we don't even need to use the voice SDK, but it would be cool to actually do it over the web as well.
Yeah.
If you use it with a phone number, you can definitely imagine all these crazy scenarios for fun, but there's a lot of legit use cases as well, of course.
Yeah, it's I would play that game if you made it. So
yeah, we'll have to do that, and then I'll have to write a blog post on it as well. So I think, yeah, there's one more project now. In a past iteration of a similar sample, I used cross-origin resource sharing to allow the client to communicate with the token service to request that token. Now in this iteration, I'm actually using a reverse proxy, but you can, architect this application however you like. I personally like to use a reverse proxy, and I'm doing that using YARP. And so the way that's configured is that when a request is made to this path, is going to be forwarded to the token service cluster. Any other request is going to be forwarded to the voice client cluster. And in that case, so for the token service cluster, it's going to forward it to this URL. And for the voice client, it's going to forward it to this URL. And so this way, I'm actually using port 7000 to merge these URLs, merge these two services together, so that I don't have to do cross-origin resource sharing, so I don't have to configure on the client application, hey, where do I actually request this token? You kind of can just use it using absolute URL on the current origin. All right, last thing to show on this thing. I should have shown this earlier, but I forgot. So I'm going to duplicate this. And then I'm going to, I think I have this phone number I need in this Scratch file. Yes, to call self. I'm going to enter this phone number in here, call it. And now you can see it's starting to buzz on the bottom right. So this is the WebSocket connection notifying, hey, a call is coming in. And you can click accept. And now you can have a conversation with yourself. Now you wouldn't actually do this, but this is to like demonstrate a phone call also coming in instead of outgoing.
I like the little vibration effect that you had on the little keypad. That was really nice.
Yeah, I think if not, probably people would just not notice.
Yeah, one of our viewers, just commenting on kind of what you're showing us, Carl says, would be really easy to put together a support system based on this. Click a button, call a support center, etc.
Mhm.
So, yeah, of course, it's super easy and looks really awesome. So,
Now, to facilitate these calls with these pets, I did not use C#, so don't yell at me, but I used Twilio Functions, which is a serverless offering from Twilio using Node.js. Now, this is not really part of this demo or this presentation, but I thought it
mhm,
would be fun to just show you. And so this is the JavaScript version on how to generate TwiML. And for each different pet that you saw in the demo, I have a different URL, which points to a different audio file. So surprise, the dogs and the cats were not actually picking up a phone. It was all a trick.
that's pretty cool. Could you increase the font size by any chance?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Just so folks can see. Yeah, it's funny you're showing this because, like, as you were going through the demo, like Twilio being HTTP based, yeah, you can use ASP.NET Core. I think most of the folks here will probably be using ASP.NET Core, but you could also statically generate those TwiML files and put them in like a CDN,
Hmm.
and you can really scale out kind of like your phone service based on that. So, like anything that can serve up that, that response could easily power your phone system, which I think is really really cool. So,
Yeah, yeah, for sure. If you don't need any dynamic logic, then you can just use static XML files for this.
mhm,
Or you can also use, I don't think I have this product pinned over here, but it's called TwiML bins, which is essentially what you were saying.
mhm,
But it's more convenient because you can do it directly from the Twilio console. Now you can create a TwiML bin here, give it a name, and then just specify this TwiML down here. Now it isn't 100% static. This actually supports the mustache language, so it's grayed out. So maybe it won't be as visible for people. But like you can see here, you can grab like parameters, like the from parameter and the body parameter that are passed in as the
mhm.
form, as the form into the HTTP request that will be sent to this. And in that case, it will be replaced correctly. And so you can add a little bit of dynamic, but this is like well, Twimblebins itself is free, so it doesn't matter how many calls are made to this,
Mhm.
which can be cool if you have straightforward scenarios and you don't have like you have to maintain a lot of less code and a lot less infrastructure than hosting these kind of things yourself.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I could see if you're hosting like an event and you just have a phone number that people can call, get the latest information about a particular event, and you just kind
Mhm.
of read that to the person over the phone. Yeah, this would be great for that. So,
This is also how I built my proxy phone number. So I had like a dial from caller ID would be like I think I don't need to specify the caller ID, and then I just specify my personal phone number in here, and so whenever a phone came into here, it's just forwarding it directly to my private phone number.
oh, that's pretty cool. Very cool.
All right, that was all the demos. So if this was interesting to you, you want to learn more, check out the Twilio blog where you can find a lot more .NET content. It's not only about Twilio, so it's also other .NET content that may be interesting. So definitely follow our blog. Um, there's the SDK, which I mentioned. Then there's also the helper library, which I contribute and some other folks contribute to as well. I have this open over here actually. So feel free to go to this Twilio lab /Twilio ASP.NET URL. Give us a
Mhm.
star. If there's an issue, report an issue. If you want a feature, let us know as well. And we'll see. Our goal is just to make integrating Twilio into your ASP.NET application as seamless as possible. And then you can also find some of the documentation on how to like create these TwiML responses. In this case, we're actually using ASP.NET MVC, and you can see it's using this SMS request class. And this SMS request class is part of this helper library. And it lists all these properties that Twilio will pass as the form. And so ASP.NET will use their model binding to automatically bind to this request. So this can be very helpful. In minimal APIs, you can't do this, unfortunately, because they kind of stripped out some of the more complicated binding. But if you're using MVC, Razor Pages, you can do this. So I'm going to quickly show you that class just so you can see. So, you can see the ID, the body, the status, some other things. Now, for callbacks as well, so if somebody responds to your SMS or clicks that dial button, you also have voice requests, which will give you more information about the call, the direction, the digits, which we used. We extracted that digits property manually from the form in the past, but if you're using this class with MVC, it will be automatically bound for you. So that's all like helpful stuff.
That's very
to
cool.
get you going quickly.
Yeah, and .NET 7, I know the ASP.NET team's working on bringing some form of model binding to minimal APIs. So, like as a minimal API user, I would expect you Twilio folks to eventually kind of build the same functionality for minimal APIs. But I would probably wait until maybe .NET 7 is out for folks to maybe expect that, right?
Yeah, we consider this. I made this proof of concept source generator, which would like generate the mapping code or the binding code. So it would be like a really fast mapping from the form to the object. But it was like a lot of, it was complicated. And so we didn't want to introduce this if you could simply use like the form or use the query string binding, or if ASP.NET themselves is going to add this logic in anyway. So I think, we made sure to document it, how you can do it. And we're hoping that the binding will come from ASP.NET and from the .NET team itself at some point.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I'm excited to see where minimal APIs are going. So it's definitely a really great fit for kind of the demos you showed today in terms of like building that bridge between, Twilio, the service, and our applications that we're building. So very cool stuff. I'm excited about it.
Yeah. If you're interested in learning more about some of the concepts that I introduced in these demos, there's a blog post by Chris on how to use it with minimal, like how to use Twilio SMS and voice with minimal APIs. You can learn how to do that in Grok trick that I showed. The proxy phone number that I used to hide my real phone number. All this stuff we have as blog posts, so that you could get to start. I also have this WebAssembly tutorial. This is from 2020, so this is from .NET 3.1, I think. And this is also an older major version of the Twilio voice SDK. So it's a little different than the sample I have now. So I have some work updating this. But the concepts are still the same. So hopefully you can, make the upgrade and translate it. So yeah, I would definitely advise you to check out our blog and play around with Twilio.
Awesome. Very cool. Yay. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being, active in chat and talking to us. I also want to thank Niels. Obviously, this demo was great. I think anyone trying to build things with ASP.NET Core and phones, super fun. So again, thank you so much. If you have any other last comments, feel free to say them now, Niels. If not, I can just kind of wrap down. And folks, if you have questions, feel free to reach Niels or me. I'm going to try to get as many of these links as possible so we can kind of put them in the show notes. So anyone viewing this in the future, either on YouTube or Twitch, they'll be able to access those links. So I'll give people a second. If not, let's go ahead. Not seeing anything. I'm going to add my screen here. So just to reiterate, thank you again, Niels. That was really a really great talk. I really enjoyed it. If you want to learn more about JetBrains Writer, you can head over to jetbrains.com/writer. You can also read some of our .NET content at blog.jetbrains.com/.net. Do me a personal favor, go to this video, like it, subscribe to the channel. That really helps us know whether we're doing a good job with these webinars. And if you think we should do something a little better, leave a comment. It helps us either way. So thank you for that. Again, thanks to Niels for coming. Make sure to go to his blog, which I find one of my personal favorite blogs to read about .NET. So go to swimberghe.net. And be sure to follow him at Real Swimberghe on Twitter. So short of that, thanks, and we'll catch you later. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.